Today's episode is sponsored by Light and Grace Wellness Spa, located in Warwick, Rhode Island. They are a women's-only exclusive boutique spa where you can definitely relax if you are a busy entrepreneur or mom on the go. Check us out at wellness.spa@yahoo.com to book an appointment today. Hey guys, Erica Scosio here with Practical Bizz Podcast, and I am very excited to be with our guest today, who is an author, a coach, and has quite an extensive resume, and we're going to let her share a little bit about herself in a minute. But today's topic, we really wanted to talk about leadership and what to do and not to do as a leader. Is one of my favorite topics to talk about as a entrepreneur with 42 staff members and 250 students and an exorbitant amount of families on top of that. Leadership is something that you have to have those skills. So I wanted to welcome you to our show.
Thank you.
Can you tell folks a little bit about your history of how you got here? How did you get here?
It's a really interesting and long story. I can tell you that. So I used to be a high school English teacher. That was my first career.
Yeah.
And I taught for 10 years. And then I had an opportunity to go to work at GE, which happened to be in the same city where I was teaching. So I started off just as a part-time summer type job, and then they hired me full-time.
Yep.
So from there, I stayed in that industry in aerospace for the next 30 years.
So as a woman in some type of a higher position.
A woman in a male-dominated field.
My point.
Oh, by the way.
My point, exactly.
Which made things very interesting over the years. And that's how I learned a lot about what to do and not do as a leader.
Yeah.
Because I was definitely in the minority.
Mm-hmm.
And I could tell by the way I was treated, what the culture was in that particular company. And companies do have separate personalities and separate cultures. And you have to adapt. Yep. And if you don't adapt, it's true, you're not going to fit in. You're just not going to fit in, and it's going to be much more difficult for you to get your job done. So what I found, first of all, at General Electric was they had a very open type of leadership team. And you could approach people. There wasn't a lot of fear. You saw them around. They were visible.
Yeah.
They lived the values that the company proclaimed and supported.
Yeah.
And I was very comfortable in that environment. I really liked it, and I flourished.
Yeah.
So I got recruited to go to another company, which is now BAE North America, and I was there for 2 years. Then I went back to GE. And from GE Syracuse, I ended up down in Morristown, New Jersey, which used to be an RCA facility, but GE had taken it over. Mm-hmm. And then Lockheed Martin bought out GE Aerospace and everything that was within that realm, including the old RCA.
So it seems like you probably have picked up a lot of knowledge along the way.
And all the different cultures.
Yeah.
Which is really, really interesting.
Yeah.
So I had a job. The job before I went to Morristown was in Valley Forge. That was also a Lockheed GE facility. We were in the GE building. Mm-hmm. And I had a lot of latitude and a lot of leverage there. A really good boss who kind of just said, go do your thing. And, really was a good leader and took people out to lunch, arranged skip level meetings, and that was kind of that GE culture that was carried over.
Yep.
Then when I went down to Morristown, which had been an RCA culture, it was a little more tight-laced.
Yep.
We had, my boss, for one thing, he asked me to take notes or something like that, and I said, what would you like me to do? Pour your coffee and stir it for you as well? And then he came up to me and said, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean blah, blah, blah,
Didn't mean
blah."
it that way, yeah.
But that was the mindset.
Sure.
That was the culture
Sure.
there.
Well, things have changed. I would imagine it, not 100%.
Well,
but things are moving in that direction.
they are moving
Yeah.
away from that kind of mentality and mindset.
Yeah. It still exists, but we're moving away.
It does really still exist. And I think culturally, the place you work really reflects the culture of that particular area. Okay. So besides the corporate culture that has grown up, and this is very true, especially in companies that were established like 100 years ago, like GE and RCA, right? So then when I went to work at Raytheon, I found the culture there really, really different. They did not have the same kind of rules. For one thing, this is very interesting. At GE, they actually defined what personal space was, and they told people you can't invade anybody's personal space. So that means if you're leaning over the to look at their computer, at their screen, you can't get like on top of them, right? But Raytheon didn't have any such measurement.
Sure.
And I found it very disturbing that, personal space wasn't like a thing there.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, whatever. And I found that people would walk in your office in the middle of your having a meeting and they would just start talking.
Yeah.
And,
I know about that life, unfortunately.
it's rude on any level.
Sure. Yeah.
But on a business, big company level, it's kind of like insane. It's kind of like, what is going on here? So what happened is that, unfortunately, I was in fighting mode because I was determined that I wasn't going to take a lesser role. I was hired as a manager in a specialized area, which a lot of people didn't have expertise.
Sure.
And I just thought to myself, I'm coming in here and I'm not going to let them kick me around.
Yeah.
So I started to push back, and nobody really appreciated that. And I learned a lot about leadership there as well, because what I found was people were running to your boss and running to your manager and complaining, "Oh, she did this," or "She won't do that." And I had a great boss at the time, and he said to me, "Listen, I want you to really excel in this job.
Yeah.
So go a little easier on some of these guys." And I thought, okay. But they did not understand what my role was. Whereas in the GE and the Lockheed mentality, when you had that specific role, usually there were only one or two people that knew how to do that job. And I got recruited to Raytheon for that specific reason, because I had specific expertise.
Oh.
But it was good that my boss knew it and the recruiter knew it and I knew it, but the message really didn't get around to anybody else. So they fought me on a lot of different points. And I had just come off a major job off of Lockheed Martin. And so I knew kind of what the government was looking for. And I said, when something came in that said you have to go back 5 years for your past performance, I said, that's no longer true. I said, we just finished this major proposal and you only have to go back 3 years. And the guy said to me, well, I don't care what you did there. We're going to do what we do. So there was a comment period, and I wrote in a question, and I said, is it a 5-year standard or a 3-year standard to go back? And the question got incorporated into all the other comments, and it went through all the gates. It got through everybody's approval. The program manager came into my office, sat down, said, I'm taking this question out. It was pure power.
Yeah.
It was just power. Like, you're not going to tell me, how to do this job.
Right.
And there were a lot of other incidences like that where I could see where people weren't following instructions, and I couldn't follow what they were writing because they hadn't followed the instructions that the government had given us.
Yep.
And I went to the program manager, completely different program, and I said, "Hey, Kevin," I said, I can't decipher this, what these guys wrote. They didn't go down the list of what the government was asking for." And he said, "Oh, they told me they can't write it any other way." And I said, "I don't think you're going to get scored very well on this." Long story short, they ended up losing that because the government couldn't find the answers to the questions. Yes.
Right. But ego got in the way, and they knew better.
Gets in the way, right.
So that's not great leadership.
No, that's bad leadership.
And taking your feedback from everyone at the table is very valid, and you have to do that as a leader.
Right.
And I think, too, leadership is definitely people who have influence, right? And so he was using his influence not in a way that was beneficial to the team,
negative,
or the company. I think the other thing, too, is when you talk about, you had made a really good point earlier about the culture.
Yes.
It's people that make the culture. The company doesn't make the culture. It's the people within that company.
Right.
Right? And when you sign up and they say, these are our values, and that's what you're signing up for. And so you had two very clear examples of these were our values and they followed them. And then here's what we're going to tell you the values are, but this is what we're really going to do.
Exactly.
Right? So you have two great examples right there. So let's talk about, how would you explain leadership?
Well, I think it's very simple, frankly. It's not as complicated as people think. I think the number one leadership quality is showing that you are human. You, for whatever reason, people get into these jobs and all of a sudden they become dictators. They become, feared by people. And yeah, you're going to get cooperation, but people aren't going to be engaged if they don't feel like you care, or that you made a mistake and you admit it, you don't cover it up, which I found to be quite common. And listen to people, be open. If you say you have an open door policy, then live up to that.
I have an open door policy. I think, too, sometimes people will use the words leadership and management as though those are the same. And they're not.
No,
they're not.
Not.
And anybody can be a leader, right? You don't have to have a title to be a leader. That is something that I believe instinctually, even as a teacher, with my teacher hat, right? I have children that are very young that you can lead. So an example would be a couple of weeks ago, we were doing a theme on hibernation and Arctic animals. And we ended up doing a fundraiser with the WWF. And all of these young children, ages 3, 4, 5, 6 years old, harassed their parents, but said, we got to save the polar bears.
Yeah.
Our goal was to adopt one polar bear. We adopted 14.
Oh, my goodness.
In a 2-week period. So anybody can be a leader. Anybody who has influence and uses it in a positive way to rally the troops, if you will, for a common cause, to me is leadership.
Right. Yeah. I think it doesn't matter what level you're at. So my experience is with very large companies, but I find the same issues pop up in smaller companies and small business as well. And as far as leadership qualities go, if you're running the place, if you're the CEO, or if you're in charge, you have to recognize those leaders that come up through the ranks and encourage them, and not tell them that they can't do something, because that's going to quash their desire to go ahead. Now, what if you said, well, we're only going to do one? We're only going to do one polar bear.
Yeah.
When everybody was chomping at the bit to do the other 13.
Yes, yeah.
Right? So that would have disappointed a lot of people. And what happens to morale in that case, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Do you feel like, I do remember listening to you talk a little bit about like people being in busy work or people really focusing on what they're supposed to do. And I really believe also in raising the bar of excellence, right? So knowing your standard for your industry and setting that as your goal as a group, getting everyone together to move towards that common goal,
Right.
it is what I think a good leader does, is how can we be better, always looking inward, right? Because I feel like the leader that I don't want to be is the ones that are not accountable and blame everybody else for, oh, that's because this one didn't do this or this one didn't do that, right? For me, as an owner of a company, I'm responsible for everything at the end of the day, and I'm accountable. So that's something that I try to instill in everyone in my place, because at the end of the day, we're all responsible for our part in the smooth running of the business,
Exactly.
And I do like what you said too about caring. So empathy. So, empathy is a quality that maybe some have more instinctually than others. Do you find, since we talked about the men, do you find that women instinctually have some qualities that are natural for leadership in terms of when it comes to caring for the people under their care,
Well,
under their steward?
women are more empathic
Yes.
than men in general.
In general.
I know that's
That's general.
big generalization. But if you did a survey, you would find that women are more empathetic than men. However, I find that when you get women that are really fighting against this male domination, you get women that will take on that persona.
So try to kind of fit in, or not
for
be
whatever
seen
reason.
less as not. I think their fear is that they won't see me as strong if I don't,
Right.
toe the line.
Right.
Right.
So we had a woman leader when I was in Moorestown. I can't remember her name right now. And it's probably not, but just as well that I don't bring it up. But people would ask me, what do you think of her? What do you think of her? What do you think of her? And I said, I think she's an old white man in a dress.
Jeez. So you didn't have much respect for the way that she was running the ship.
It was the same old.
Yeah.
And I think she probably had a fear of sticking out. She eventually did get let go anyway.
Yeah. So body language too, I think is really important, right? There's so many key indicators on top of empathy, accountability, being able to open questions, have people question your thoughts, right? I think that's something that a good leader will do, will allow others to ask questions and not have that fear of, well, I'm not asking the boss that, you go ask him, right?
Absolutely.
So yeah, having that persona that everybody can come talk to you about things that might be difficult or just new ideas. I love when people give me new ideas. I beg you, does anybody else want to talk in this meeting besides me? Because I could talk to myself enough. I've called us here so I can hear your thoughts.
Right.
Right. And so, those are ways that I think is super important when you're running a team, whether it's 5 people or, hundreds.
Right.
Yeah.
I agree 100% with that. I think when you get into the larger corporate world, there's so much competition among people in general, everyone, men and women, to get to that next level that you don't have a good level of sharing. You have people kind of holding information, knowledge is power, and they're not going to share it.
That is the most craziest, that's probably the most profound thing that you said right now, because I see that very often. And it's if you go to cross-train somebody and it's something that somebody primarily does, and, well, why are you showing her how to do that? Well, that's my job, right? But cross-training is good for the business.
Yes.
Because you could get sick. You could get COVID. There's a million reasons why cross-training makes sense, on top of, if you're a good leader, grow your people.
Exactly.
Grow your people, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, according to Jack Welch, 30% of a leader's time should be spent in cultivating your team and mentoring your team.
Yeah.
And I showed some of those metrics to one of my bosses, and it wasn't a positive response. I mean, he was very nice to me.
Yeah.
He basically said that's never going to happen.
Yeah. So you're an executive coach. Can you tell the listeners what exactly does that mean? Because there's lots of different kinds of coaches. So talk to us a little bit. What is an executive coach?
So I was trained to work with executives and professionals. And so that spans the spectrum of those two names. So I have worked with executive senior directors, VPs, in local large companies like Torrey Plastics, FM Global, some of those places.
My husband used to work at Torrey.
Oh, really?
There for a long time.
Oh,
yeah.
That's interesting. And then you have the smaller companies where the leader, such as yourself, is having some kind of internal problem or even a personal problem. So
you kind of coach,
like in a small business or a family-owned business. That's another whole topic.
Yes.
I could write another whole book.
I bet you
family-owned
could. That could be chapter 4.
Yeah, because the problem with family-owned businesses is that what happens outside the business is dragged into their daily work.
Yeah.
And if something happens in the office during the day, it's dragged into the family relationships.
Yeah.
And that causes a lot of problems. And my clients will say to me, I really love my brother, but I can't stand working with him.
Yeah.
So my job is to try to help them.
Yeah.
It's try to help them circumvent the issue or somehow learn to deal with it on some level. And sometimes people end up leaving because they can't reconcile it.
Gotcha. What are the biggest problems that you see executives facing right now?
Well, I think a major problem right now throughout the workforce is engagement. People are just not engaged. There are more studies coming out. I know in 2013, Gallup came out with a study that said 70% of the workforce was not engaged. And there was another survey that came out recently that said 50% of the workforce is not engaged.
What do you attribute that to?
Well, I attribute it to culture and leadership issues. When you watch somebody get laid off, you start to worry if you're going to be the next one.
Yeah, sure.
Right?
And a lot of companies right now are faced with that as we are heading into a recession. They try to lean up the business a little bit.
Exactly.
That's for me is usually where, and I talk about that quite often, is the last place. Because to me, those are assets, not liabilities. So that's the last place that I really want to start is that, letting go of my people, especially ones that you have, if you have done your job right, cultivated, trained, and grew. Like that's an investment. Why would you then take your investment and get rid of it? So I know sometimes it's necessary, but that's my last resort.
Well, it hurts the whole workforce. All the employees, as they're watching people pack up their boxes, are so demoralized and so, set back on their heels that it's difficult for them then to buckle down and get their job done.
Yeah. So a good leader would maybe do a strategic planning meeting where everything is kind of laid out is, hey, this is what we have to do. Here's what we're doing to shore up the company. Here's your part in it. Here's what we're doing. Here's the sacrifices we made, as a company. Not just like, here, the sacrifices we let go of Mary, right? But the things that they had done first previously, I think communication and transparency goes a long way.
Absolutely.
Goes a long way.
And I think trust is another issue as well. I was working on a project once that had a very strict timeline, and only a very few people could work on it because it was highly classified. the kind of stuff that they're finding in the president's offices right now that they're rooting through. That's what the kind of stuff was that I was working on. Yeah. And it was an all-nighter. So at 4 o'clock in the morning, somebody's at the door, and I opened up, it's my boss. And I said, "What are you doing here at 4 in the morning?" He said, "Oh, I couldn't sleep." And I thought to myself, you were just checking up on me.
Jeez. 4 in the morning?
4 in the morning. Wow. Why would anybody get up out of bed and drive to the office?
So, so what would you say are in your book there? Can you tell us a little bit about maybe some of the chapters or some of the things that you want to share with the audience that leaders do that we shouldn't be doing? I know we covered a lot. Well, is there anything I didn't touch upon?
I think one of the things I like to talk about quite a bit, which people don't talk about that much, is somebody who's a weak leader. Mm-hmm. Somebody who gets put into the position and they're a complete milquetoast. They don't stand up to anybody above them, and they don't help anybody below them because they just don't want to rock the boat. And they're more afraid of their skin than worrying about their direct reports. Yeah. And I find that to be egregious in the leadership role, and it's more common than you think. Mm-hmm. Especially, as I was saying earlier, if you're in a very competitive environment, right? These people just want to stay under the radar. Yeah. They don't want to be popping their heads up to get.
They just want to collect their check, up, right? Not get seen by the bosses, so they're not, right, on the chopping block next. But,
right. Yeah. I have a whole chapter on exactly that. It's called "Peace for Pay" or "Pay for Peace." Yeah. What it is what you're finding now. It's kind of got a name. It's called quiet quitting.
Yes. Yeah.
And people might have that disengagement or really bad morale feeling, but they know they get a car payment, they get a mortgage, they have 2 kids in college, they can't walk away. Right. So what they do is they show up every day and they do exactly,
get their check. Yeah.
They do exactly what they're told, not one iota more or less, and then they go home. Yeah. You're not going to see them there on the weekends. You're not going to see them working late. They're out of there. And that's what I call pay for peace.
Yeah. And that's detrimental to a business, especially during a recession.
Definitely.
So I'm very excited to learn more about your book. Please tell folks how they can get a hold of you, where they can find your book. And we're also going to invite you out to our business summit in September. That would be amazing to have you, so people can learn more about effective ways to lead. I really have enjoyed our conversation.
Thank you.
So take a look in that camera there and give folks your contact information, how they can reach out to you, and where they can buy your book.
Okay, my name's Mary O'Sullivan. You can call me at 401-742-1965, or you can go to my website, which is www.encoreexecutivecoaching.com. My email address is mary@encoreexecutivecoaching.com. And you can get the book on Amazon. Also, if you want a free download of my workbook that I wrote to go with the book, you can go to www.visionaryleaderbook.com.
Thank you so much. It was really delightful talking with you.
Thank you.
We probably could have sat at this table all day and talked about it. I feel like it was very, very easy to do that. So if you like this episode and want to have more wonderful guests like Mary on our show, please hit the like, subscribe button, share, comment, whatever you feel empowered to do, and help us move Practical Biz Podcast to be the #1 fastest growing podcast in Rhode Island for businesses. Thank you. Bye-bye. Are you a business owner? Are ready to get your startup? Well, starting. Have a burning question you'd like us to answer? Want to know more about the services we offer? Or register for upcoming workshops and events? Looking to book a guest speaker? Or like to be a guest on the Practical Biz podcast? Visit our website at stellabusinessconcepts.com.